love the men's space. Coach Kunle and I are absolutely delighted to have this opportunity week after week to speak to different gentlemen from different parts of the world to understand what drives them, what support and assistance looks like for them, and how can we co-create safe places and safe spaces so that men too feel supported. Because we live in a world, in an era where the notion is men don't need help, men don't ask for help, men don't need directions, and men don't need empowerment, which is not true. Remember, men and women are all part of the human race, and as humans, we're feeling creatures who happen to have the capacity to think and act. But fundamentally, we're feeling beings. And so how do we harness that, nurture that, and give an opportunity for young boys and young men to develop emotional intelligence capabilities for self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship building so that they too can have fulfilling lives instead of constantly running around producing output, right? We want men to perform, but they're more than that. So how do we do that? And that's the whole point of this conversation. And today, to enjoy this important dialogue, Anwar Wade from Belize joins us today. Anwar is a newly minted environmental engineering environmental undergraduate from Taipei, Taiwan, and with big dreams and big aspirations. And I am excited to have him join us and talk to us and share how he wants to make an impact so that we can figure out how we can help him. Because when he succeeds, his entire community succeeds, and so does humanity. Anwar, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So talk to us about why environmental science and what are you excited about now that you're out of school, ready to make an impact?
It's the environmental studies is actually a very interesting journey from how I got to that point. So when, as you may know, when I was very young, they killed my dad, and I always like after that journey of mourning and me and my mother getting ourselves back on our feet, I just wanted to make sure that I do something that I know is gonna help other people who also went through that. Initially, I wanted to major in social work because I knew that would give a direct impact, but I always had a love for nature and the environment. And I just felt that any person who works in a field that is working on protecting the environment, protecting our home, is actually helping also people who are in need, especially because when it comes to people who have limited resources, those are the first people who feel the impacts of climate change or when there's a natural disaster because they don't have the resources to be able to get back as easily as someone who has the resources. So yeah, it was just more for a decision because I always knew that I wanted to work in something that is for the people and for my fellow humans,
Yeah. Beautiful.
Wow. That's sounds so good, and wow, that sounds so good. Because anytime I see people who are passionate about the environment, it speaks a lot to me because I am someone who is passionate about the environment as well. Even though I might not know the technicalities, but after us on what you think is the major challenge we face in our environment these days, because we cannot divorce ourselves from our environment. As a matter of fact, there is no health without environmental health, so to speak. Or what do you think is the major challenge or challenges we are facing? Go ahead and speak to some of those challenges on how they can be remedied.
I think I personally, for me, from the core, one of the root problems I think that comes with the environment is, I think, one, education, and firstly, education, because I still feel that although we're in a point right now that we notice that there is an issue with the environment, for example, Dr. Henry and I can attest to the heat waves we're having in Belize right now. they're crazy, but people just say, oh, it's getting hot, it's getting hot, it's getting hot, but people don't understand where this heat is coming from, why there's a heat wave, why do we have wildfires on the highways. So before we can get to people to going to any other cause, we need to have everyone needs to have a general education of what is happening in environment and what can I do to prevent this. And this would come to people thinking, for example, like maybe I don't need my AC the entire night. Maybe, oh, I should turn off the lights when I'm sleeping. And all of these micro things that you do add up. That's why it's important to have education. And I think a second thing that's important right now with climate change is collaboration. For example, we can take Belize. I think one of the reasons that we lack education and the motivation for education in society is because we have so many resources as yet. We haven't experienced serious issues in our resources, so we're taking it for granted. But if you stop thinking about, okay, I'm okay, so I don't need to worry about climate change, and you start thinking that we're in this together and collaborating, then we can see impact. We have to consider Earth, all of our homes, and not just think about Belize or think about Guatemala or think about the US. It needs to be everyone together realizing, okay, this is an issue, and if we don't work together, it will never be solved.
That is such a beautiful point you're making, Anwar. And the world has come to a place where we don't see the connectivity. Somehow the Western notion of individuality has become the prized pursuit. Because when you are worshiping the individuality journey, then you can pursue capitalism and you can make money and you can become a millionaire. And these are the things that are fed, right? But not everybody is going to become a millionaire. And even when you become a millionaire, you can't eat the money, you can't wear the money. So how do we come together as humanity? And when there is a wildfire, as you said, or when there is a tsunami, it doesn't check to see who a millionaire is. Everybody gets fucked under the same thing.
Yes.
So creating that awareness is so critical. Talk a little bit more about how you see creating that collaborative spirit in Belize, given the huge American and British influence.
I think that there needs to be more synergy between the local communities and also government entities. I think that there's a lot of information that although we put it out there, it's not being fed to the people in a digestive way. So I think there has to be more interaction between those government entities and the local communities to actually know what's happening. I do see now that there's a lot of I have noticed that in Belize they're having like VNRs and they're inviting the public to be able to attend discussions about what is happening in the environment, but I still think that it needs to be done more in a local community, like going to villages and talking to them like, oh, my crops, what are happening with my crops? I haven't had rain a couple of days, my tank is empty. Those type of small questions. And also I feel like for the collaboration to happening, we have to have the government going into these villages and also having trainings for them. Not just villages, but even in towns, because I think you can notice also that in towns, if you there are certain areas that do feel certain effects when it comes to like limited water. I don't have pressure in my house because there's not enough water, stuff like that. I hope that answers.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's absolutely absolutely spot on. And I mean, one thing that is obvious in what you have said is taking responsibility. Our environment is one thing we need to take responsibility of making well, because if we degrade it the more, I mean, that amounts to hurting ourselves the more. I want you to speak to leadership and this responsibility taking. I mean, most people, what they feel is just about having lip service to solving environmental issues. We have people gather together at a point in a particular place, COP24. I mean, these are just tags sometimes. I want you to speak to leadership and how it can influence this Because I know that a lot of leaders will listen to these, and we can also put it in their faces. How do we make sure conversations as these do not end up as lip service in the leadership space, and then in taking personal responsibilities about our environment?
For example, those those forums or those big conferences that they have like Hope, I do think to an extent they're very important, to have those major collaborations, to have those financing for countries. But I do think that we need sometimes, I think as leaders, we need to realize that the reason we're leaders is for the people. And I think between all of the forums and meeting and conferences, sometimes we forget it's more than just a task. So like I mentioned to you, I think this is why it's important to have these trainings, to actually have the leaders within the communities, because you need to be reminded about the reality of what is happening and why you're doing it. For example, for me, I started an internship at the International Office for Migration, and you don't realize how oblivious you are to certain issues until you go to the community and see what is actually happening. Like I went to a couple of field work visits, and I just simple stuff, like you notice that, oh, some of the kids aren't going to school. They have to help their parents and work, and it's stuff that when you're living in a town or when you're in a bubble that that you didn't intentionally create, that you forget what else is happening. So the idea, I think the main thing I want to say is just to remember to not just be connected with the people at the top. You need to be connected with everyone, because you need to remember that when you're working in a field like the environment, you're doing it for everyone, not just for the meetings, not just for the how do you call it, the approvals of project proposals, but why that project proposal is happening, who you're trying to serve through this project proposal.
The connectedness and the interdependency is such a critical point.
Yeah.
I come from the world of finance. In finance, we have a term called the triple bottom line. Business cannot make a profit unless it's hosted in a human sustainable environment with human capacity and capability.
Yeah.
And human capacity and capability cannot be sustained or built in an environment that is destabilized. So when we look at profit making, we look at expanding business, we look at economic development and economic prosperity, we start with, is the environment viable? Is it stable? Is it tending towards a catastrophic event? Unless it's stable, we don't go there. So make sure that the environmental stable, then build the socioeconomic framework that's going to give that sustained stability. Only then the business is viable. And any business that takes away the socioeconomic balance and viability, and that puts toxicity in the environment, ultimately it's committing suicide slowly, right? Because the organization is not viable and the business's very existence is for long-term value creation. So from the financial world, we educate people, we try to remind people, even if your motivation is your individualism and your profit making for you to become a billionaire, why would you burn down your house because you want to have one thing in your bedroom? Seriously, it doesn't make any sense, right? So as we think of this collaboration and the co-creation, what are the ways in which we can inspire people? And I want you to think of this through the lens of men, young men struggling to find their place today. And when men don't find the ability to find their place and space to make an impact, then they turn into violence and destruction, environmentally and socioeconomically. So these are interconnected. And you were a young man whose father's life was snatched away by disenfranchised young men who didn't even probably know what their purpose was, and destruction was their actual pursuit, right? That's how they let their emotions out. So this is a cyclical phenomenon. And you have lived through this. So I want your perspective on having lived through this, having experienced the ramifications of it, how do you see us getting to young men?
Um, I thank you for the question. To be honest, I think it's very interesting because I think that one of the reasons that I feel like men are lost is because we have forgotten that they also need care. And I think that thing of them needing care and not getting it also has caused that type of trauma. So I feel like one of the best ways to get through to these men is they need a guide. I think they're missing that mentor component, that training component, that care component that for some reason, due to all the unfortunate events that are happening in our generation, they're not having. The care component that I was mentioning is, yeah, like I think we're at a point where I think there is I didn't realize that in Belize there's still this idea, which is I do understand the concept of everyone having responsibility on the household, but putting a lot of pressure on the male, thinking he's the only one that has to provide. And at a young age, for a boy, I think at a very young age, that can be a lot of pressure. And when you have all that pressure and you don't know how to channel those emotions that you're feeling, that can lead you to a lot of negative pathways, ways for you to not feel that pressure. For example, for me, I think I was fortunate that I think I was, to be honest, if I had to say, I was raised by females. There were not many like I had one uncle apart from my dad, so I had the opportunity. You know, I had that care component in the household, and I think that kind of influenced the feminine energy, that the energy balance that I needed. I think that's something else that I think males would also need. So as I said before, mentorship, training, and that care component that I think every individual has a right to have. But unfortunately, some of us do not have the opportunity to have that in their life.
That was so insightful. I mean, the conversations, and I think it's something that should be ongoing. It shouldn't have like an end. And you have provided a lot of action plans, even within this very short time that we've had you on the man space. That's been so insightful from you, and we really appreciate your time. I mean, we will have a lot of people who will be willing to reach out to you, engage you, and also share some of those inner places. So how do our people reach out to you?
I'm on most social media platforms. So, you know, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, any of those social media platforms, and easily accessible, and even if necessary through WhatsApp.
Perfect.
I think
And we will make sure we post to your social media handles when we release this so that people can reach out to you, Anwar.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, to be honest, I'm looking forward to meeting other people who want to do impactful work in the world, not just the Caribbean or Belize, but the world also. So I'm looking forward to it.
And that is an important piece of wisdom for all of us to take away, right? When a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, we can have an earthquake in California. That is how interconnected we are. We don't realize it, right? There was a massive shift in the earth in Banda Aceh, Indonesia, and my home country, Sri Lanka, got the tsunami. Why would that ever happen if you don't understand the connectivity? There you have it.
Yes.
And Belize is one of those places where we actually have the blue hole, right? There is a massive sinkhole in the ocean, and it's a huge tourist attraction. How did it happen? Why does it happen? Where is that water going? There is so much we don't know. And when we make our environment sustainable, our lives are sustainable. So it's really heartwarming to see young people be able to do this, because you truly are helping us create a different mindset. And so in closing, if you had one piece of wisdom for the world.
Wisdom I would have for everyone is, like I mentioned, I think for me, one of the most important things that we should all just go with is that we're all brothers and sisters. Not to think too much about yourself as an individual, because we're at a point right now that we're at a point where in our planet, we're in our society that we cannot move further anymore just thinking about ourselves. We need each other. And that comes to the idea of sustainable communities. I think collaboration, sustainable communities, that is the future. You know, we have I think there's, you know, that saying that says, if you move alone, you move faster, but if you move together, you go further. And for me, that's always been like something that has been there to me. Like, I just think we need to care about each other, support each other, because when you're at 50 or when you're at 40, someone else can be your 60.
What a beautiful, beautiful way, especially from a young person. That is actually music to my heart. And in the interest of full disclosure, I know Anwar. I know him through his mom. And just our relationship itself, to me, is a symbolism of how much we can accomplish when we are together, right? His mom is a business owner in the community, and we've become friends. We are not from the same culture. We don't speak the same language. Our education's background, everything is different, but there's one thing that connects us, our humanity.
Yes.
And when we connect from that place, because that's the only true connection. So I truly appreciate that when you say that, it truly rings true, because I see that in the way you live, your family lives, while you're surrounded by a community that doesn't believe in that, right? So to me, that is power, that is courage, because you're doing something that the society thinks is foo-foo, is what they say. You're too soft, you're too foo-foo. And so to everybody out there, just take a moment and build those lasting relationships. And I truly want Kunle to have the last word as we bring this man's space to a close. So Kunle, you sum it up, my friend.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kaz. It's been wonderful and it's so insightful from Anwar right on the man's space, this edition. And I'm sure everyone who will end up watching this will gain a lot as we have discussed the vital part of our environment, being that inevitable, we cannot do without it, part of us. So I mean, it's such a great thing. And one thing that keeps reoccurring is the word collaboration right there. We cannot do it alone. We have to merge. We have to form, strategic alliances. We have to come together and build our world together. Like Dr. Cass mentioned earlier on, the common denominator is humanity. Whatever we do, we should have that at the back of our mind, and that should inform how we deal with one another. That should inform how we deal with our space, with our environment, both internal and then the external environment. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We appreciate your time. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.